what is wrong with how most organizations investigate incidents today?
There can be a bureaucratic exercise, just, go through the motions of filling out the piece of paper to say, yeah, the incident happened and this is what caused it. And then that's it. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's the fact that there's no follow-up afterwards. So you've had an accident, you've had a guess at what might have caused it, but there's no action taken. I think there's a great opportunity there to really dig a bit deeper and learn something. And I think every accident, every incident, if it's important enough to be reported, it's important enough to have some level of inquiry to find out what happened as best you can, and to try and make some change or learn something that can improve the work situation.
Hello, Des. It's so nice to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Beautiful, my man, and thank you so very much for being here. You see, I truly appreciate you. And you see, Des, oftentimes I love to thank my guests for two things. And I do this so often to the point where it has become my anthem. So firstly, my man, I want to say thank you so very much for investing in yourself. You see, Des, you are on this platform right now because you did invested in yourself. And oftentimes, my man, I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. You see, there's some couple of months back, I was on a particular road, and just by the roadside, there was this very tall, unattractive mango tree. And I used the word unattractive because the mango tree's got no mangoes on it, and the leaves were all dry. So I just walked past it and I went my way. But you see, my man, just recently, I was on that same road. And this time around, a lot's changed about the mango tree, you see. The mango tree caught my attention pretty good from a distance. And immediately, I got the urge to move so close to it, of which I did, and it wowed me. Because now the mango tree's got a lot of mangoes on it, beautiful green leaves and healthy branches. And not just mangoes nowadays, I'm talking about ripe mangoes. It was such a beautiful experience that day, and I was so excited. It was more like the tree was saying, Elisha, look at me now. I've got beautiful fruit and see my branches. I was so excited that day. Here is my point. The fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming the amazing Des that you are today, that alone has made it impossible for me to skip you. And that's why you got the request from me to be on the show, because I was attracted to the fruit of all that you're doing, Des. The work you're doing, the impact it is having, your philosophies, your insights, and how you are offering your solutions. Your wonderful book, these stuffs are beautiful. And just before I sent you that request, my man, I said to myself, I've got to benefit from these beautiful things Des is doing. And not only me now, because I don't want to be selfish, and even with the audience. And here we are today with the amazing Des. So thank you so very much for doing that yourself. And secondly, thank you for saying yes to the invite. Because if you had said nope, there was nothing Elisha could do about it. Thanks so much, my man.
That's a beautiful introduction. Thank you very much, and a lovely story. I love the metaphor, and I just love the fact that you find and feel gratitude all around you. I think that's something that I'll definitely take away with me after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you too, man. I love that. So let's get started, Des. You see, I am quite excited to have you on the show today for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. I believe in order for one to transition from a terrible situation to that of a beautiful one, I believe it takes the application of knowledge, quality information, and not just knowledge alone, but the application of it. And you see, my man, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness, ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking. Why? Because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation today very important to me and even to the listeners. And the second reason why I'm excited to have the incredible Des on the show is for the sake of the audience. You see, my man, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got lots of information flying out there. So those folks trust me for quality, eye-opening, and very important information, of which I am totally convinced that our conversation is going to be insightful and impactful. So for that reason, my man, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or your professional journey, because right now we are so curious. We want to know how this got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Des, my man, over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. So a bit about me and my professional career. I drove forklifts while I studied law. And when I graduated, I was admitted to the bar in Western Australia as a solicitor, and practice didn't really sit well with me. It wasn't me in my heart. And so I went back to driving forklifts and, sat down to rethink what I was going to do with my professional life. And it was there that I got involved in health and safety, and really I've never looked back. And I've been grateful for the last 15 years where I've been able to work in some interesting environments with some fantastic people and learn an awful lot about health and safety in the way that we do work.
Amazing, and that's a beautiful one to learn from others. That's an awesome one, and I love the transition. Beautiful. So I've got some questions here. Are you ready for me?
Yep,
All right, beautiful. So let's begin first with your book, that amazing book. So what inspired you to write Beyond the Incident? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So I mentioned that I moved from law to health and safety, and I was fortunate enough to have a lot of insight into the way that the law treats evidence and treats causation and a lot of other things, ethics, bias. And I noticed that when I came into health and safety, none of those things were addressed very well when it came to an investigation. So all of us have exposure to the workplace. Some of us have had exposure to an incident, perhaps even a serious incident where someone's been injured, or maybe someone almost got injured and it was pretty scary. And a good learning organization should want to investigate that, understand how it happened, and potentially stop the next incident from happening. At least that should be the goal. And by taking these things from law, I think that we can do that a lot better than we currently do. So that was my inspiration for writing the book. It was really bringing those learnings and lessons from law and applying them to a safety investigation.
And that's a smart one. Only smart people think that way. Nice one, my man. So what about the title? How did you come about the title, Beyond the Incident? What formed that title? Can you talk to us about that too?
It did sort of come to mind. I was brainstorming a bunch of titles, and I wanted to set the scene that an incident's happened, and this is all about what happens after that, how the organization responds to it. So I thought Beyond the Incident was a nice way to sort of capture that moment in a interesting title. It's a title that makes you think, oh, what's this about? That's a haven't heard that kind of title before.
Yeah, and it's pretty attractive, and one becomes so curious. What is it about the incident? I want to know. So there was this part I'm still curious about. Yeah, how was the transition process like? From law to health. How was that transition like?
To be honest with you, it was pretty humbling to go from wearing a suit, walking through the city, off to court, the sort of thing you see on TV in those lawyer dramas, to being in high vis and safety boots, on the back of a forklift or in a truck. It was quite a humbling experience, and I think that humility, to some extent, has stayed with me in the way that I approach investigations. I always want to hear someone's story. I don't want to prejudge them. So when I'm talking to someone and investigating and doing an interview, it's hopefully comes across from a position of humility and non-judgment. And I've also, it gave me an insight and a deep respect for the work people do. Even, truck drivers and manual laborers and all that, a lot of people take a lot of pride in what they do. They're driven by a purpose that might be different to yours, but it's equally respectful. And I think, that transition also garnered a deep respect for me with the work that people do at any level.
At any level, I got that. So you used the word investigation earlier. So what is wrong with how most organizations investigate incidents today?
Well, there can be a bureaucratic exercise, just, go through the motions of filling out the piece of paper to say, yeah, the incident happened and this is what caused it. And then that's it. And that gets filed away somewhere. And maybe there's a legal obligation to do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's the fact that there's no follow-up afterwards. So you've had an accident, you've had a guess at what might have caused it, but there's no action taken. I think there's a great opportunity there to really dig a bit deeper and learn something. And I think every accident, every incident, if it's important enough to be reported, it's important enough to have some level of inquiry to find out what happened as best you can, and to try and make some change or learn something that can improve the work situation. So what I mean by that, I can give you a bit of a story. And that story is a construction company. They employ carpenters, and a carpenter was using a circular saw, a handheld circular saw, cutting a piece of timber. Now, they were holding the piece of timber with their other hand. The circular saw hit a knot in the timber and kicked back. It sort of moved back very suddenly, and the carpenter cut their thumb open with that blade. Quite a serious cut. Required surgery. They were otherwise okay. They kept their thumb. It was quite a serious incident. And most investigations would look at what that carpenter did and think, okay, well, any carpenter knows that if you're going to cut something like that, you need to fix the cutting piece, the piece of timber that you're cutting, down to the table, the workbench, and then you use two hands with a circular saw. Sometimes you might use one hand, but your other hand is never on the piece of timber that you're cutting, for that very reason, so that you don't cut your hand. So you could easily end the investigation at that point and say, well, the carpenter wasn't following the right process. Maybe we need to retrain them. Maybe we need to give them a written warning to follow the process. But we instead we dug a bit deeper. And what we found was that the carpenter's resume and reference letters had dates that didn't quite match up. And there was some discrepancies in those documents. And when we pursued it a bit further, we found that the agent that recruited this carpenter was actually based overseas, was forging these documents and sending people off to us in another country as carpenters, people that were not carpenters at all. So this fellow that had the injury was not a properly trained carpenter, even though his documents said that he was. And what we actually uncovered was fraud on the part of that agent in another country. So there's something really valuable there. By digging just a little bit deeper, we found something really valuable, both for the organization and for the carpenter, because now that we know the truth, we were able to support that person, get them on an apprenticeship, and see them through to become a carpenter in the end. So really good outcomes, but it was just from taking a bit more interest and digging a bit deeper.
Oh, thank you so very much for sharing this story, Des. While you were talking earlier as to not just focusing on surface level, but going deeper, I wanted to understand what you were trying to say. But with this story now, I get it. Not just making conclusions based on what we can really see on the surface level, but let's go a bit deeper. Wow. You just expose how important it is not to easily judge and make conclusions based on what you can see right now. Wow, this is a very important one. Thank you so very much for sharing. So, I've got some questions here. We still have like two more. So, how can we move from blame to learning after harm?
That's a great question. And I think that there's many ways that you can do that. I think the easiest way is to check the language that you use. If we talk about seeking justice or having a just outcome, think about the connotations that that word just brings to the conversation. If you need justice, then there's been a wrong. If there's been a wrong, then there's someone who's done the wrong. There's a victim. And so suddenly you're looking for someone to blame because you're looking for a perpetrator who did the wrong and hurt the victim. And I think language has a big role to play in that. The words that you choose to describe something can have a big impact on how it's perceived and what approach or perspective you're bringing to the conversation. If instead you used language like, this is an opportunity not for us to investigate, but for us to learn. The process and the functioning might be very, very similar to an investigation, but the language is different. And people are going to be more open to a learning exercise rather than an investigation. That sounds very formal. Whereas a learning exercise, it's less confronting and more likely to solicit sort of open responses and a good conversation. So my first piece of advice is to be conscious of the language that you're using to describe things.
Be conscious of the language that you're using to describe things. I got that. Okay, so we've got two more to go. So, what is, or let's say, who is the forgotten witness in safety investigations?
It's also a really good question. I think that we often go straight to the injured person. Sometimes the injured person is the only witness, and so they're almost the only person you can speak to. It's actually quite a great benefit if you have another witness. But I think that there's a witness that often goes overlooked, and that is what I call the expert witness. But it's really someone who has a good enough understanding of the work, who wasn't connected with the incident, ideally, who can say and give guidance as to how the work should have been done, what should have happened that day, what was the expectation, how was work designed to happen. So you can have a comparison. You can say, this is what was intended to have happened, and this is what actually happened. And that's very useful. That's a useful exercise to compare those two things.
Got it, my man. Got it. So finally, what is one practical change investigators can make starting tomorrow or even right now?
I think it's understanding that the best form of evidence is oral evidence. And at the moment, there seems to be a preference for documented evidence and written records and signed pieces of paper and must be dated. Yes, those things are important, but sitting down and having a conversation with someone is arguably more important. You get a lot more perspective. You get a lot more information. You get to ask further questions. You can't interrogate a document in the same way. And there's so much more power and insight from a story that you can get just simply by having a good, humble, honest, open conversation.
Got it. I got that. So back to your book, all right? What is one thing, or what are the things that you hope readers take away from reading your book?
Well, the book's designed to be a bit of a practical guide. So I'm hoping that if someone is involved in workplace incidents and what happens after an incident, that this is the sort of book that they'd have by their side that they can pick up, refer back to, and choose some tools that might apply to this, but kind of refresh themselves when they get confronted with that sort of situation. So it's the sort of book that you want by your side when you're going through this process.
It's a powerful book. You forgot to add that. A very powerful one. So to bring this to an end, yeah, man, what would you like to leave the audience with? Like a final thought. And to those folks who like to reach out to you, learn more about the wonderful stuff you're doing, or make a purchase of your wonderful book, how can that be possible?
So the book can be purchased on Amazon quite easily. I think if you search for my name, Desai Link, or Beyond the Incident, it should come up fairly easily. And one insight to take away, well, investigations, I firmly believe, in order to be a good investigator, that's an ongoing process of constant practice and constant learning and knowledge expansion. And I think that that's a good practice to carry into all aspects of your life. Just constantly be on the lookout for more learning opportunities and more opportunities to practice your skills. Only good can come from that.